we're live. Back again. One and only Media Maestros pod. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ram, here with my main man, Ray. We're back again for episode 3. We're glad you could join us. Glad to have your listens, your views. I'm glad to have you with us for another trip down this road. Ray, how are things going, my guy?
Things are going pretty well. I haven't really been listening to that much new stuff, but there is one album in particular that I'm excited to get into later in the episode.
Okay. I'm excited to hear about that too. I haven't heard a ton of new things, but there are a couple of things I wanted to get into. I am dealing with some
Mm.
grief today. As of last night was a bit of a sad experience for me as an Eagles fan in the Super Bowl. Not my best moment, not my best moment.
What were
But
your feelings, from beginning to end? How was that roller coaster?
that's a great question. I tried to just to stay composed. I tried to stay calm. The Eagles took a big
Okay,
lead to start off the game. Tried to stay even
right.
keel. I think that was for the best because that lead quickly dissipated into a comeback for the ages. Shout out to the Chiefs. Salute
Mm.
to all the Chiefs fans watching. We're glad to have you with us. But I know there was one kind of moment that caught everybody's eye. And I know that caught your eye a little bit too, with the one and only Riri coming back in action. What were your thoughts on that
Oh
performance?
yeah. So I don't know if it was just my TV, but the audio wasn't coming in right. It
Hmm.
kind of sounded a little bit muffled. I don't know.
Hmm.
But as far as the visuals go, I like the aesthetic of it. Just it did feel grand, which I would expect
Yeah.
from a Super Bowl performance. Uh Comparing it to the weekend, was the weekend last year or was that
That
a
was the year
couple of
before
years
last.
ago?
Last year was the Compton, LA kind of
That's
super
right.
special.
That's right. Yeah. Well, the weekend is the one in particular that came to mind, because of how like extravagant that one was, and I was kind of comparing it to that. And Rihanna has a lot of hits.
Classics.
She from different genres too. Like she has her like electronic pop, Calvin Harris, but
Yeah.
also the more old school, like going back to Umbrella, you know. So it was just cool to hear all of those mashed up together and just enjoying the show. What did you think?
Yeah, it's really just unbelievable the amount of hits she has. I mean, hit
It's true.
after hit. Please don't stop the music. All of the
Yeah.
lights. Umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
What's my name? I mean, she has plenty of hits, and it's crazy to think that her career isn't this 20, 30 year long run. I mean, in the grand scheme of it, her biggest run of hits was in a relatively short period of time, maybe 10 years, 15 years max.
Mm.
That's really impressive.
Yeah, it is impressive. I'm I'm trying to think. Is it Pande Replay was like
Yeah.
the
And the
the first
DJ
one that.
Kanda that he play.
Yeah, so coming all the way from that, to I mean, she hasn't, besides Lift Me Up on Black Panther 2, she hasn't put out any solo stuff since Anti, right? I
Yeah.
mean, around that time, which is like 2016.
Which is so impressive.
So yeah, seven whole years ago. But those all those songs still ring off as they should.
Yeah, for those of you all that listened to the first episode of the pod, you may or may not be surprised that she did not perform Lift Me Up last night. I thought that it was obviously not of the level of her other smash classics.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the mood either.
That's
Such a somber song. It's
that's a
not the
great
right
point.
stage for that.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Well, really well
uh,
said. And even though I left the night a bit sad and disheartened, I think we all enjoyed the performance from Rihanna on a grand stage.
did you see the memes that came from Patrick Mahomes after he got injured and he came back? They're calling him like Perk Trick Mahomes and stuff.
I
They had
did
to
not
dust the
see
man
that.
up.
I did not see that, but he was playing out of his mind. He was playing out of all his
Yeah,
sensibilities. So I'm not surprised. He did what he had to do. And even
he
as an Eagles
did.
fan, I have to give him a salute for that one. I have to. And it's funny as I think about that Super Bowl performance, it reminds me of a similar grand Hollywood-esque performance. I know you had a movie that was similar in that, right?
That's right. So Damien Chazelle's new picture. He is the director of Whiplash
Okay.
and La La Land as well, two really critically acclaimed movies. And he just came out with this movie, Babylon. So it's up
Hmm.
for nominations at the Oscars. It
Hmm.
stars Margot Robbie,
Okay.
Brad Pitt. Um, there's an array of character actors, but also some A-list celebrities that make appearances in there.
Okay.
And it's basically about you have these two protagonists, Margot Robbie's character and the main guy. I'm not familiar with that actor. I think he's pretty new, actually, or maybe he's new to the United States because
Okay.
he's Hispanic. And it's basically like their journey starting out trying to get into the industry. They
Hmm.
both take like different paths. The guy becoming a an assistant to Brad Pitt's character, who's like this big movie star, and then Margot Robbie becoming an actress herself. And
And are the two of them in
in
love, or are they just friends, or what's their connection?
so it's a situation where they meet, they have like this wild night at a Hollywood party, and it inspires all these things in their mind to get into this business. But they don't actually have like a relationship. Like
Okay.
they they encounter each other throughout the movie, like in a couple of different scenes. But it really just shows like his path, her path, and then how they end up intersecting. And it can kind of be considered maybe an unrequited love aspect
Hmm. Okay.
with the main male protagonist Diego kind of wanted to get involved with her, but she's more of like a free spirit, and he's been kind of yearning for her this whole time. But I think what's really interesting about this movie and what I kind of took from it the most is how allegorical it is and
Ah,
metaphorical,
yeah. Yeah.
because it's meta in the sense of it's obviously, a Hollywood director who works in Hollywood, works in the film industry, making this film kind of painting it in a negative light. It's
Hmm.
it shows how corruptive um, the film industry can be. It shows how all of the negative vices, how easy it is to get sucked into those, and how a lot of times you have to sacrifice your morals and integrity in order to get ahead and make a name for yourself. And he explores all of those themes in this movie, and that's really what um, made me appreciate it. Was he? It can be actually quite disturbing at some points, and it makes it visceral to watch these characters go through their downfalls, essentially.
So this might be a spoiler alert for anyone that wants to check out the movie, but when you talk about kind of that graphic nature, what are some things that come to mind of how the director really presents that?
Yeah, so yeah, this could be a spoiler alert or spoiler warning. But even in the first big sequence, so the first sequence, it feels like a very long time. Like I could probably like maybe the first 20 minutes is all at this party.
Okay.
And everything you could think of is going on. Like you have drugs, orgies. There's like a party, like an elephant that comes in, and there's a specific scene where they allude to like some big producer who has a underage girl,
Oh wow.
and things are going on in that sense. And
Wow.
um, there's scenes later on where people get tied in with or tied up with like the mafia. and it gets violent, and the character has to try to save another character from getting killed.
Wow.
And yeah, they really Damien Chazelle really doesn't really shy away from depicting these things in a graphic way. It's a hard R for sure.
Okay.
Definitely a hard R.
And do
Um,
you think that, we had this conversation with some of our previous movies and older episodes, but do you think that the director does this tastefully or somewhat intentionally? And the fact that it's used wisely to convey the point, or is it at times a bit oversaturated for maybe dramatic effect or for a bit of a jump reaction?
mm, that's a great question. In my opinion, I don't think that it becomes too gratuitous. I think he handles it in a way that makes sense and it's not unnecessary because he is really trying to depict things that probably have happened in real life. Like it's not some fantastical thing that you could never imagine.
Hmm.
And um, a movie that comes to mind when thinking of something that's just like completely off the wall, there's this movie called Men, and it's a movie that because I feel like there's been a big trend on making a um like social commentary horror, and Men is an example of that, and it becomes like super grotesque, and it's literally like a man who's giving birth to himself and then giving birth to himself again and again, and you see the whole process and it's crazy. But even that I like because they went there, and even though it's like something that I wouldn't be able to recommend someone to watch, it's like I'll take that over just some lazy kind of superficial run of the mill story any day. So
Okay.
that actually speaks to me more than um, most like general movies that are out there, I think.
Okay. Okay. I think that's fair. So, how does this movie tie it all together? And thinking about Hollywood, the grotesque nature of it, the excessiveness, the exorbitance, the dramatization. How does it pull it all together?
So the movie has a lot of twists and turns, where the characters end up going and how all of that is depicted. There's a scene later on in the movie that has Toby Maguire in it.
Hmm.
It's cool to see him in this film, and it's probably the most direct metaphor where you have this character who is trying to get this other character out of a bad situation, and they're literally going deeper and deeper into this like cave or like dungeon, and then
Hmm.
you see like a bunch of messed up stuff, and he keeps saying like, no wait, we got to keep going further, keep going further, keep going further, and it's like they're literally descending into hell. And
Wow.
then they finally reach this point where um it's essentially like this character who's getting paid scraps to eat um, rats. Like it's a man who's just eating rats down there,
Wow.
and I think that is very telling of what the director is trying to say, and showing how, again, like I said before, how corruptive these ambitions and what these things lead to. But there's also a really interesting scene at the end that kind of has people mixed, where it's literally the character at the movies. He's in a movie theater, and he's like broken down after all of the crazy stuff that he's gone through over the past however many years.
And this is set in the
And
future, later on in the movie.
yeah, yeah, it's like a time jump. And he's sitting in the theater, and it it just shows like this montage of films, just a montage of different films, um, different like iconic shots and scenes in cinema history, and it goes on for a very, very, very long time. Like it's very extensive, and then once it reaches its climax, it just goes right back to him, and then it just shows him like sitting there crying. And
Mm,
I think that encaptures how like this whole time everything he was doing began with his just love for cinema. And
mm,
that's really what prompted everything. But unfortunately, it ended up leading to all of these unfortunate situations happening. And but when you get to the root of it, like that passion is is the driving force that he had, and it can be interpreted in a couple different ways. That's why a lot of people are talking like, oh, this is useless, why is this in the movie, you know? But I think having that kind of like it ends right there. I think it speaks to what the whole film is kind of all about, and I think it's
mm.
an important scene to have in there.
That's powerful. That's powerful. It leads me to want to check out this allegory for the films and the media we consume on the daily and just
Hmm.
all that goes into it that we don't quite see facially.
Right. Yeah, it's a movie I recommend if you have the stomach for it, if you're willing to dive into this content matter. But it is probably one of the better movies that I saw last year.
Well, I think that's great. Is this movie currently still in theaters or anywhere we can check it out if you want to watch it from home?
Um, they might have brought it back because of the Oscars. I'm not
Okay.
sure. Um, if it is, it might be in there for a limited time.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Well, and thinking about having the stomach to endure, I wanted to
Mm,
talk about a show that I've checked out that I've absolutely fallen in love with.
okay.
And this show is called Your Honor on Showtime.
Mm,
Now, this show
yeah.
is set in New Orleans. It's based around a judge who's essentially this good guy judge. Everyone loves him. And this is a bit
Mm,
of a spoiler for the premise of the show, but I won't spoil too much of the twists and turns. But the show is centered around a judge set in New Orleans who's a good guy. Everyone loves him. He's a man of the people, a judge who's actively trying to help good people and help people that may have made a mistake or two in their lives to turn their lives around. And one day, the judge's son ends up in an accident, a car accident, where he ends up killing a boy on a scooter.
mm,
And this boy on the scooter ends up being none other than the son of the biggest mafia mobster in the entire New Orleans.
mm,
As you can imagine, this opens up a can of worms as to whether the judge should send his son to admit for his crime and be liable to face any repercussion that comes, since this mafia mobster has all of the police in his back pocket and he could easily just get a hold of the son and take care of him. Or does the judge decide to hide, try to run, obscure his identity, try to avoid the whole thing? The show goes on a myriad of twists and turns. And I believe the show
mm.
initially started out as a mini series set to last for just 8 episodes in its first season. But the second season just started about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I mean, that first season was some of the best TV I've seen in years. The star of the show
Wow.
playing the judge is Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad fame,
Great actor.
who I mean is a great actor out of this world. And he takes on a kind of post revelation Heisenberg role, if you've seen Breaking Bad,
Okay.
in where he has to adjust his character, but he's a man of by any means, he'll make it happen. And if you're into a show that keeps you on the edge of your seat, but also progresses the story without leaving you with needless cliffhangers, if you're
Hmm.
into shows that um, present flawed characters in the sense that these characters seem human, they seem like they have different interests and they seem like they have different intentions and different moralities pulling them both ways. If you're into shows that show kind of the duality of man, so to speak, without
Mm.
sounding too grandeur, I think this show is great. I mean, great storytelling, great acting, great action, great drama. I loved it. Highly recommended. Season 2 just came out, and season 2 takes somewhat of a totally different approach. I don't want to spoil
Okay.
anything, give too much away, but this show is definitely worth checking out. Have you heard of it? Are you familiar?
Yeah, I did hear about it. I ended up watching the first episode.
Okay, what were your thoughts?
Unfortunately, I was intrigued, and curious to see where it was going to go. I just didn't end up continuing on with it. But hearing about how great the show is and a lot of people raving about it, it's definitely something that I definitely want to revisit at some point. Um, I wanted to ask because, as we know, Bryan Cranston is such a great actor. Is this kind of a tour de force for him, or is there like an ensemble that you kind of get attached to as well? Like, how is the overall acting of the show with these characters?
I think overall the acting is great. It reminds me of a show I'm going to talk a little bit about later, and the fact that it's essentially more than just a story of Bryan Cranston and his son, and trying to run
Okay.
from this kind of responsibility or accountability. It's in a way a story of the city itself, but
Hmm.
somewhat in a condensed, somewhat microcosm of this one action that involves everyone from politicians to the police to mobsters to other gangsters. I think it does a good job
Okay.
of exploring you to a lot of different stories within that kind of center around this one central narrative.
Okay. I see what you mean.
One surprise appearance from Chet Hanks,
Really?
the son of Tom Hanks.
Right.
Chet Hanks of his own controversial fame, some would say.
Does he have a lasting role, or is he just pop in there?
He's present for a few episodes, a handful of episodes.
Okay.
He leaves his mark without getting too much Chet Hanks.
Sure, sure, sure.
So it's worth
does
checking
does
out.
he have an accent?
He does not have a Jamaican accent.
Okay. Okay.
He does not. But it's worth checking out. A lot of great acting, a lot of great storytelling, and all around highly recommend it. Highly, highly, highly recommend it.
So season two, like currently on releasing right now, or
Yes,
is it okay?
currently releasing out now. So I would highly recommend checking out season one first and then
Right.
getting into season two. But it's worth it. It's
Okay.
worth the watch. 8 episodes, each one about an hour long. It's worth the watch for sure.
Okay. Not bad. Yeah,
For
definitely
sure.
gonna have to check that one out.
So as I was digging into my TV show bag, I started looking for some new music to listen to. And
Sure.
I ended up coming across a new Westside Gun album. This
A West Side
album is
Gun album?
called More Black Superheroes. I listened and I was surprised. This sounded unlike anything I ever heard from Westside Gun. And I said, wow,
Sure.
this is different. Then I took a second look at my phone. I realized this was from Westside Boogie.
West Side
Westside
Boogie.
Boogie,
Okay.
newest album, 2022 special, More Black Superheroes. Are you familiar with
Mm.
Westside Boogie? You a fan?
Yeah, I am familiar with West Side Boogie. Everything's for Sale, the album that came out, I think
Mm-hmm.
2019, was
Mm-hmm.
definitely my favorite, one of my favorites of that year. And I've been keeping up with some features he's done here and there, but I actually haven't gotten to check this album out.
Yeah, as an East Coaster, it's hard to really get into the West Side and a lot of some of the West Side's biggest acts. But West Side Boogie himself, I was blown away. This album has a few standouts for me are Can't Even Lie, which is West Side Boogie and Soldier Boy.
Okay.
Great,
Yeah, I
great
saw that on
song.
the track list. I was curious to see how that would go.
Great song. Big Draco came with an appearance that I think was a great feature. Another song
There
that
we
really
go.
stood out for me was Can't Get Over You, featuring
Mm,
Smino and Touchdown Tizo. I love
mm.
Smino. I wasn't familiar with Touchdown Tizo, but I think Smino and Westside Boogie really kind of play on each other's strengths on that song.
Okay.
Highly recommend it. Love that one. Another one that a big piece of this album that stands out for me are kind of some of the skits that go along. It's kind of like an interplay with and a lot of conversation that goes into it. It's really well crafted. Westside Boogie's a great kind of has a sing melody. He's not a strong singer, but he has a nice sing melody that
Yeah, for sure.
helps with his raps. I think he got great features. All in all, it's a great album. Definitely think it's worth checking out if you're interested in the slightest.
So, given the title, is there a concept through line are those songs thematically relating to a specific topic, or are they kind of more individualized?
It's much, there are the skits that appear throughout, kind of sprinkled throughout, but it's definitely not a concept album that
Okay.
centers around superheroes, or I think there are definitely some references and, like you said, some metaphors and allegories that might hint to a greater theme of Black superheroes and kind of being a superhero as a Black man. But
Mm,
I didn't find it to be like a concept album. And I
okay.
mean, the biggest thing for me with this album, and you spoke about this last episode, is how it's really just a vibe.
Mm,
The type of song, type of album you just turn on in the summer, drive with the windows down. Even in the winter, 35 degrees out, drive with the windows down.
okay.
I think it's a vibe that it's really unparalleled.
Yeah, he definitely has that kind of sound that just makes it easy to listen to. I put him, Smino, Black, kind of
Saba,
all in that, Saba as well,
yeah,
all in that category of just they use a lot of soulful production, um, and it's just a smooth sound on the ears that I really like.
good
So
vibes, good
definitely
vibes,
got to
good
check this
vibes.
one out too.
Definitely check it out. Now I know you had something in mind that was a different sound on the ears.
That's right. Definitely more of a kind of in your face, upbeat dance album by none other than Beyonce. So this is an album that people were talking heavily about when it came out, but I was very late to. I didn't end up listening to it until last week, and mainly because I knew that like I heard a couple of the songs on it. There's a few songs from it that got big, um, and you would hear them like on the radio, television commercials, everything like
Hmm.
that. And I was wondering if the whole album would kind of be like super pop, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just wasn't really the vibe that I was trying to find necessarily.
Yeah, that's
But
fair.
in going into the album, I feel like even though they categorize it as a dance electronic album, at least for the Grammys they did, it's still pretty versatile. It's diverse. Like you'll still have like a classic R&B ballad track on there.
Hmm.
But I will say a lot of the music is very upbeat. It makes you want to move, dance, shake your hips, all that stuff. It
Yeah.
just it's just very lively, and it there were hints of that in on Lemonade, but most of that album was actually that was a pretty mixed album too. But this one focuses just a lot more on those hyper songs that you would have found on a Lemonade, and just incorporating like house music, which is a big inspiration of this album, and um, just playing with different sounds, kind of the way that Drake did on Honestly Nevermind. People compared those two albums
Yeah.
when they came out because of the dance uh, sound that they ended up moving toward, and a lot of other artists kind of following suit. But I think this was a really good album, and I think that it can have something for everyone, but it mostly um, just makes you want to, like, you could easily think of this album being played in a club, like almost start to finish. Like again, there are some like slower songs,
Yeah.
but damn near start to finish, it's just a party. It's
I,
just that kind of sound.
yeah, I've heard of some clubs actually having Renaissance parties, just start to finish, top to
Yeah,
bottom, bottom to top, just getting it.
I couldn't blame them. It's made for the party scene for sure, and just dancing and having a good time. It's very carefree, feel good music.
I think that's really the vibe we need. But thinking of that, and your book, was it album of the year? Was Beyonce slighted once again by the Grammy board?
So I wouldn't call it my album of the year,
That's fair.
but out of the albums that the Grammys choose,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it definitely should have gotten it over Harry Styles
Mm.
because, and I don't even hate that album. I
Harry's
just don't
house.
think that yeah, Harry's House. I don't think that it's had the impact and it's had um the legs as an album because he does have like a couple big songs off of it, but Renaissance was kind of a movement when it came out, and people are still kind of talking about it, and it shows the impact that it had over this past year. So,
Yeah.
Beyonce ended up, breaking the Grammy winning, uh, like most Grammys of any human being already. So she
Mm-hmm.
didn't need that, but out of the pool, it was definitely a top contender, and it did get Best Dance Album, which uh, I think if it was going to get Best Album, it definitely had to get that one. But there was uh, it was a mixed category. There were a lot of genres represented instead of just going all pop, which I appreciated. So that was pretty cool to see.
That's fair. Well, I'm gonna check it out. I've heard bits and pieces, definitely heard some songs you can't escape. But I want to check it out start to finish and get that groove, get a little Virgo groove going.
Absolutely, you should. It's a good
Now,
sound. It's a good listen.
before we get out of here, quick question for you, Ray. What are your we talked a little bit about Rihanna, talked a little bit about Beyonce. I'm curious, what are your top five Super Bowl performances of all time? I know for my list, I'd have to go with Prince number one, MJ number
It's a great
two.
one. Okay.
Gotta go with Beyonce number three.
Okay.
Gotta go with The Weeknd number four. And gonna let Bruno Mars be number five.
You know, I think those would all be in my top five. I would have to, yeah, I would have to say that those would probably all be in my top five. I wouldn't have an order, um, because I feel like comparing, like, well, I mean, I guess you could compare, but such an iconic performance as Prince versus one of the newer performances like The Weeknd. You know, it's hard to compare those, but yeah, those are probably the strongest in my mind for sure.
I think we can agree on that. We can agree on that. Well, we can't leave you without a blast from the past. And this week's blast from the past, we're gonna take it to television. That's
Okay.
right. Our blast from the past is The Wire.
The Wire, classic.
Released in 2002. I mentioned how Your Honor centers around the story of New Orleans much more than it centers solely around the story of Bryan Cranston's character as the judge. And thinking about The Wire is the quintessential series that details the story of Baltimore, much more than it is a cop drama or a gangster show or a drug show or a crime show. It's so much more of a story that details addiction, it details loss, it details coming of age, that details fall from grace, that details so much of what makes us human, which is why I think the show
Mm,
has resonated with so many people for now more than 20 years. So for those that haven't checked it out, I highly recommend giving it a watch, giving it maybe a couple watches and then another watch after that.
mm,
Definitely rest in peace to Michael K. Williams, who played the legendary
absolutely.
Omar, one of my favorite villains, favorite characters, maybe favorite anti-heroes of all time. Definitely
Wow.
someone that set the bar for characters on television.
Mm. Yeah, this is a show I watched the first season of. I never ended up getting back to it, and I hear people say it's one of the best shows, if not the best show of all time. And I could definitely see how, based on what I've seen, how it could be in that conversation. And it's one really interesting thing is just seeing all of the acting talent that came from that
Mm,
show.
mm-hmm.
All of the different actors that we'll later see in like big blockbusters and things of that nature. The Idris Elbas,
Yeah,
the Michael B. Jordans,
yeah.
these top acting talents of today, and showing not necessarily, I'm not sure if this is their first, for all of the, like, Wood Harris as well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but it's it's incredible to see, these earlier performances of these great actors in those shows.
Absolutely, most definitely. And looks like our time is running near. So, from one great show to another, we thank you all for checking out episode 3 of the Media Maestros podcast. I'm one half of your team, Ram, with the one and only Ray. We thank you all for checking us out again. And until next time, see y'all.
Have a good one.